Okay, we're going to be talking about the last three graphs, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. And here's the thing. If you can't sketch a quick graph of sine, cosine, or tangent, you can't graph these things. And I say that because they're all reciprocal functions. So take a look at cosecant of theta. Cosecant, oh man, I forgot the C again. Cosecant of theta. That is just equal to 1 over the sine of theta. Well, if the biggest value of sine is 1, that's actually going to be the smallest value of cosecant. Um, and there's going to be undefined parts. At 180 degrees, sine of theta is undefined, and you're not allowed to divide by, or sine of theta is 0 at 180, but you can't divide by 0, so you get an asymptote. So, you can kind of see it here, and I think I'm gonna sketch it out and kind of pull it apart so you can see it here. But I'm gonna do this on cosecant. I'm gonna kind of sketch out the axes real quick. That's not too great, but I'm just kind of tracing it. And in red, you can see the sine function. And if I were to pull that out, you could see that's kind of separate over. That's the sine function we've been dealing with. Okay, makes sense. Now, the way you do the cosecant function is anywhere you see that sine function cross the theta axis, you draw an asymptote because you can't divide by 0. Okay? Once you've done that, you find the minimum maximum points in the gaps in each of those things. Draw a little empty dot there on the maximum for this first region between the asymptotes, and a little dot on the minimum between the next two groups. And it's not a parabola because it's crunched in there by the asymptotes, but it is still kind of a U shape. Comes down to there and goes back up. Comes up to the point and then goes back down. And then what you do is you get rid of the sine function. And it's covered up a little bit here. Let me move it just a smidge. And that's it. That is cosecant. So you can see, well, maybe you could graph this without knowing what sine or cosine graphs look like. It's just going to be really hard and not very nice. But what is going to happen is if you don't know what they're supposed to look like, then it's really hard to graph them out properly. Um, with tangent and cotangent, same kind of thing happens where tangent crosses the theta axis and is zeros. Those become the new asymptotes, and the old asymptotes go away. So you have to be able to kind of sketch out a quick graph of the sine, cosine, or tangent function that's relating to the cosecant, secant, or cotangent function. But once you sketch that out real quick, then you just do the reverse of it, right? And you can see here the cosecant and secant are basically the same, kind of like these up and down U shapes. Let me pull out the picture of just let's put it over there, of the cotangent functions. You can see they'll actually be similar in shape, except they go the other direction. They go down instead of going up left to right. They go down left to right, and they're basically shifted 90 degrees or like half the period. Okay, so the whole goal to these is you have to sketch the original reciprocal. Okay, so the idea is, and this is one of the reasons why we haven't been plugging in a bunch of values and making table of values, because that's a pain. You want to know the structure of how they go up and down, how long the period is, where they cross the axes, because once you figure out where they cross the axes, now you've got the points for where the new asymptotes are. All right, let's go ahead and try some. Oh, one thing too, just like tangent, cotangent has a period of 180 instead of 360. Okay, so I'm going to graph one of the other trig functions, and you can see this one here is y equals 2 times the secant of theta. So if it's secant, I know it's actually related to cosine. So I'm going to sketch y equals 2 times cosine of theta. That's where I want to start. I don't actually start with graphing secant and theta. I take a quick look at this, and at this point you probably know, hey, that 2 on the front there, that means it's got an amplitude of 2. That's pretty nice. The period is still 360. Okay. And with cosine, what were the nice little formulas there? It goes through 1/4 times 360 over b, which is 1. So quarter 360 is 90 comma 0. All right. And then the next one is 3/4. I'll write that up here. 3/4 times 360 over 1. Well, that's just going to be 270 comma 0. So what these things are in zeros for cosine, cosine's roots, those are now the asymptotes for the secant. Okay, let's do a little sketch here. Sketcheroony. And I'm going to move this thing down just a smidge here so it's not quite so close to my camera. Okay. Now, one thing here, before I just kind of, however tall I drew the y-axis, that was kind of how high I made the amplitude. But now, because I know my graph actually goes to positive infinity and negative infinity, it's just that strip in the middle that's not there, I'm actually going to be a little bit more careful about what my amplitude is represented by. So I'm actually going to go by 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I'm still going to build the periods the same way, though. I want 360, and the 90 and 270 are important to look at. So let's do every 2 is 90, 180, 180, 270, 360. I can even do it in the other direction. Negative 90, negative 180, 270, and negative 360. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sketch my little graph out. It's cosine. I know it starts at the amplitude, and it goes down, crosses through at 90, and then it's going to come back around at 180 and to kind of change direction and go back up through at 270 and then go on up. I'm going to do that the other direction as well. Bring it down, swoop over, come back up at 270 and 360. So now, with that sketched out, I'll do it in green here, draw your asymptotes. Wherever you see that thing cross that theta axis, you've got to put a vertical line in. And there. Now, for the actual graph itself, find the minimum and maximum points inside of each one of those little gaps. There's max, min, max, min, max. And go ahead and draw your U-shapes. You want to start from the min or max or from the asymptotes and come up. So next one is in the bottom, so I'm going to start from the bottom and work up and then come back down. Start from the top, work to the maximum there for the cosine and go back up from the bottom to the, and then okay. Now the finishing touch, delete the cosine graph. And that is the graph of y equals 2 times the secant of theta. And that's it. You have to be able to sketch the cosine, secant, and tangent first. Oh, sorry. Sine, cosine, and tangent. I don't know why I said cosecant.